Hello, welcome back to the Dev Backend Theory series, episode 2, Databases and APIs. So there are several database frameworks that you can choose from when incorporating a database in your project, including mongoDB, DynamoDB, MySQL, PostgreSQL, and even Google Sheets. You have to choose your database based on your needs. Every single project that you create will have different needs. For example, I find MongoDB the easiest one to use. Amazon DynamoDB is probably one of the most secure NoSQL databases. So really research every database type, the small differences in between them, and make your decision in the end because it's hard to change databases. ORMs. ORMs are interfaces to databases in a coding language. For example, in MongoDB, there's the Mongoose ORM in Node.js, which allows you to use JS functions to add and delete objects, for example, in your MongoDB database. There's also a MongoDB driver for Golang, for Python, for C++. So when you're searching for an ORM, make sure you know what type of database you're using and what language you want to use for whatever your project you're creating, and then go search up the different ORMs available for that language and that database. APIs. An API is an application programming interface, which is basically a collection of functions, and you ask it something and it gives you an answer. You don't need to know how it works. So as a backend developer, you're going to be calling from APIs. For example, an ORM is actually an API because you're calling adding and delete functions, but you don't know exactly what the ORM's doing in whatever the native language is. So for MongoDB, it'll be running a Mongo command, and Mongo does have its own special commands. And also, let's say you're running a SQL ORM. Also, let's say that you're using a SQL ORM, then it's going to be running SQL commands, but you don't need to know how they work. You just need to know how the ORM is calling those. So APIs are, of course, useful when creating your backend, but also when you create your backend, you're basically creating APIs for the front-end developer, which can be you, it can be another person. So the front-end developer will use your backend functions to do the things that they need to be done, but they don't need to know how it works. There's also an important shell command to make note of, which is the curl command. You can also use postman, but basically curl and postman just make requests to a server. So usually your server will be running locally, so you're using the local host, which is basically your own local IP address. The curl command is a little harder to use in Windows, but it gets the job done when you need to make requests, for example, post or get requests to your server to test it. And always remember that your shell is probably one of the most important tools for you when you're developing both front-end and back-end because it lets you communicate with your computer directly. So the curl command is basically just built into your shell, and it's a very powerful command because it gives you easy testing at your fingertips. That's all for today's episode. Like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.